I am delighted to announce that the 13th Archbishop of Wales is Bishop John Davies, Bishop of Swansea and Rugby.
Well, I have just been elected as the 13th Archbishop of Wales. I feel overwhelmed, but I also feel privileged and excited at the opportunity that's been given to me and the trust that's been placed in me to fulfill this important role. A word that many wouldn't associate with the work of an archbishop is one that I've had much in my mind, and that's rehabilitation. I think that the perception of the church these days is sometimes far too negative, and I think sometimes we even feel negative about ourselves. So what I think I'd like to try and encourage is a rehabilitation of what it is to be the church, what it is to be a Christian, and what the calling of the church is to be, which is to be positive about its evangelism, positive about its role in society, and positive about upholding people in that society, and giving voice to the people who haven't got a voice. When we talk about rehabilitation, one of the things we need to do is change the church's view of itself. People need to understand perhaps better why they come to church. It's not just a habit. It's not just going to a club of which they're a member. It's about being encouraged and enthused to become more active as Christian people in the community. Because at the end of the day, the role of the church is to support and create communities. And I can give some very concrete examples of what we do in our own diocese. We have, in different parts of the diocese, but predominantly in Swansea, a number of family centres which are located in some challenged and deprived areas of Swansea. Recently, those family centres have supplied some over 3,500 hot meals to people during the summer holidays. They provide opportunities for families to come together, to be supported, to be provided with facilities which enable them to function better and flourish better as families. One of the challenges that the church is currently facing is about places like this, buildings. We are very attached to the buildings in which we gather week by week, but one of the things that people do have to come to consider eventually is whether all the buildings we have are assets. Sometimes they can become burdens, quite frankly, because they can take up so much time, energy, money and resources simply to keep them open. And that can distract us, quite frankly, from what the church's real purpose is, because the church's real purpose comes to fruition when people leave these buildings. We come here to be challenged by the gospel message, but we must leave the buildings behind and go into the communities to create better places for people to live. We have to engage as well, I guess, in better evangelism, understanding more fully what the gospel means to us as church people, but then what the gospel can mean to people outside the church, because it is meant to be a gospel of good news, a gospel which gives people support and love, hope in their daily living. And again, we need to move away from that mentality of simply being closed, gathered community. We are often perceived as having nothing relevant to say to people outside, and that's something that, if it occurs, needs to be changed. That's not something that anybody can do on their own, and one of the things that the Church in Wales is trying to develop as it moves towards its centenary in 2020 is a new vision of how ministry is delivered. And by ministry, I don't mean just services. By ministry, I mean the way in which the church and its people relate to the outside world. And that's something that we are trying to develop through team ministries, teams made up of ordained paid clergy, ordained unpaid clergy, and lay people all of whom have a huge variety of skills and gifts and talents which they can give to the wider community and for the benefit of that wider community. When I talk about gifts and talents, I mustn't forget to talk about my fellow bishops. There are 6 of us, and we each have different gifts, we each have different talents, we each have different strengths, we each have different abilities. And one of the things that I'm very anxious to continue to encourage, as did my predecessor, is a shared responsibility, sharing those gifts, sharing those talents, working together as a team. Back to Jesus, who sent out his disciples, not on their own, but together in teams to work together. And one of the things that he was brilliant at was communication. He was always ready and able and very capable at speaking out on behalf of those who may not have had anyone to speak out for them. He was always ready to engage in public debate, not simply for the sake of doing it, but because he believed that that was the role of the church, to try and work to create a fairer, more just and more open and welcoming society. And I would hope that I would be able to continue that work. That's something that I can't do on my own. It's something that I would want to do with my fellow bishops in our various areas of responsibility, and also with the clergy and lay people of our church. We very often perhaps think of the glass being half empty, whereas the glass of the church in Wales is more than half full. We've got a huge pool of talent, and we really do need to use it to the best advantage. One of the things that we can be very proud of is the way in which the representative body of the church in Wales, which is the body that looks after the church's material resources, especially its financial resources, has put money in the hands of the dioceses to try and develop that 2020 vision that I've just talked about. So we have people, we have places, we have presence, and we have finance. And with all of those gifts, I'm sure that we can continue to grow in confidence and be better at being the church for the community. I very much hope I can rely on the prayers, the support, and the activity of the people who make up the church in Wales.